Greg Smith, national. I'm gonna call you the national champion of rivals. What's up, my brother?
Hey man, doing well. Busy. It's been this has been a fun, I guess, 24-ish hours. Kind of being around Husker Nation, right? As Twitter kind of exploded last night.
Well, I don't think it was last night. I think it was yesterday morning when you were had a a seatmate. I want to ask you this, Greg. Hey, so Greg, you listen, man. Look, if you don't know Greg, he's humble and good dude. But Greg, man, you the one that got the party started with seeing McCord on the flight. I wanted to ask you, and all jokingly, did you ever think like, hey, I needed to change seats and sit next to him for that hour and 20-minute flight?
It's funny. I did think about it, and here's what I'll tell you about. None of us could do these things without our secret sauce, the wives behind us to give us all the actual good information and suggestions. My wife was the one that suggested that I go back there and do it. She said you might as well go back there and sit by him. I did not, but no, it did come up. We almost did it, but we did not. He actually sat. He was in the row behind me, but I didn't sit next to him though.
Yeah, you should have pulled up your phone and put up like a Husker icon or something like that just to pique his interest. But obviously, with the potential Dylan Raiola, visit coming up. And, everybody's trying to, figure out what could, be a possibility from your perspective, from a national perspective, when you when you think about where Nebraska was as far as quarterback play. And then also quarterback play / it's the first glimpse of your program. And then you get Kyle McCord, which in any year of a transfer portal, it'd be a great get to even have the visit. And then the potential of Dylan Raiola. Talk about the national perspective, how quick Nebraska has changed almost our identity without even getting a commit yet, of their program. And it seems in, 24, 48 hours.
Yeah, it's a great point on that because I can't tell you the amount of people nationally that have reached out to me to kind of ask what Nebraska has going on, to be first of all, to just be in the mix with these guys. And, as somebody mentioned this to me earlier, just a little bit ago, just if you think about it, and Nebraska has been going through kind of, talking to all of these different portal quarterbacks, and you knew that they would try to get somebody, you just didn't know who. But if you think about it, if you just said after the Iowa game that Nebraska will have a legitimate shot to get Ohio State starting quarterback and have him be their starting quarterback, you would sign up for that all day long. That would pique your interest, and that would make people kind of stand up and take notice of what Matt Rule is doing over here at Nebraska. So just that piece of it alone was going to get conversation started. But then when you added the Dylan Raiola factor into that, it just exploded everything. And I think that, people across the country, whether it's people that follow college football, people that cover it, other recruits, other players in college football, people are definitely talking and buzzing about Nebraska after this. It felt like last night for a stretch there, everybody was talking about Nebraska football.
Yeah, and also I wanted to ask you about, just the overall, outlook or I guess the view on Nebraska staff. Because, just from my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, they always just seem like they're just going about their business. Sometimes they're like, under the radar, and you just like, whoop, was somebody popped up on campus that you didn't, hear, see a tweet or anything about. Talk about the national view of the work they've done in, a little bit over a year. Cause obviously, they came in, periodically as far as who they hired throughout December last year.
Right. Yeah, I think that the perception of the staff is that they work hard and build really good relationships, but they do not necessarily covet like the publicity about it, right? You're not going to see like a lot of like graphics ahead of time or where this staff is going. You don't actually see all that many like, the pictures of the coach in the high school and all of that stuff. Like you don't see a lot of it. You see some of it because high school coaches and administrators get really excited about that, and it's good pub for their programs, right? But you don't see Nebraska kind of like pushing that all that much. And so it can kind of lead to people wondering exactly what they're doing. And I do wonder like how long it'll be before people just fans just kind of accept that they're working really hard behind the scenes. Because you were starting to hear it before
Right.
this stuff kind of all bubbled up, right? You were starting to hear, man, are they really doing stuff? And then you started seeing the stuff about the flights, right? And then you started hearing about Kyle McCord and some of the other stuff. And so, yeah, I think that they are definitely a staff that is known for working hard and building really good relationships, but they are not about kind of publicizing where they're going and what they're doing. And people are going to have to get used to that. It is tough, I think, for everybody to get used to, but you're just going to have to kind of have faith and rest in the fact that they're back there working because obviously they have been.
Hey, Greg, talk about the little bit of a change from last year. Obviously, it was I'd say it's a unique class where you kind of had 39 newcomers, both signees and transfer portals, etc. Versus where Matt Rule said he'd like to be mostly 90%. I think high school kids, and then be very selective in the portal. Talk about that change, in a year, but then also how that will change how they approach quarterback from Levitt that went to Arizona State to McCord, obviously that was on your flight in here, and to Will Howard that I think they was assumed that they met with, and anybody else we haven't heard about. Talk about that change, because I think on a national level, it might create some. Where it's like, okay, if Nebraska's really talking to me, they have like a plan for me versus if you're going out there and trying to recruit and get guys in the masses.
Yeah, it's been interesting because when you and that's where it's really come up. It's really come up a lot with the different kids. What you hear from high school players around the country, and Corey Barney was a guy that recently said this too to me, is that Matt Rule and his staff wants to recruit and build this program up with high school players, and they're going to have a plan for me once I get to campus. And he just hit about three different really good things you want to hear when you hear a recruit talking about his coaching staff, in particular the part about them having a plan for him, right? So if you can convince high school players to stick around because you actually have a plan and you see how their careers can unfold, I think that helps you to retain those players, right? And then on the flip side, if you're Matt Rule and the staff and you say, okay, we want 90% high school players and then we're going to supplement with the portal, it's just a better message, I think, for kids to receive versus, okay, every year your spot's going to be up for grabs because we might be shopping in the portal to try to get the next latest and greatest thing, right? And so I just think it's a little bit different way to build the program. And I think that people, when Matt Rule first started saying stuff like that, they were kind of skeptical because it doesn't seem like that's kind of in vogue right now around the country. But if you do look at the best teams in college football right now, that is how they're doing it. Like Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, those teams have done a good job of developing their high school players, and then they're selective and go get difference makers in the portal. They still do that, but they're able to mostly be built through the high school ranks.
Greg, moving forward, obviously everybody's pointing towards, after Wednesday. I always say the weekends or the week is on the downhill slide, but obviously this town is going to be buzzing. Maybe as early as Thursday. What's your, I guess, assumptive outcome for the weekend? I guess, give me the perfect weekend, and then give me maybe the expected weekend as far as commits or position groups that are definitely attended to.
The perfect weekend is that you end up getting like kind of public verbal commitments from both Dylan Rayola and Kyle McCord, and you get one from Julian Fleming going into the weekend. So then that way, when Dylan Rayola comes on campus for the weekend for his official visit, then it's all about, hey, were there any surprises, any surprise guys that decided to come last minute with him that we didn't know that Nebraska was in on? Because that's one of the things that we consistently say about them doing work behind the scenes. It's not just that, Dylan potentially coming could open those doors. There are players that Nebraska's recruiting that we don't know about, that big moves like that could get them really in the door with, right? And so I think that would be something that would constitute the perfect weekend. I think the most likely scenario is that we don't get a public declaration from Dylan before he were to come on campus, and we still got to figure out the whole situation with McCord. And really, because quarterback is different, right? Like you can only play one, and you got to be able to sell a vision about how that would all work together for all parties involved, so that everybody would be happy. It can be done,
Right.
and I think that it will be best for the team long term. But you got to sell that vision if you're Matt
Greg, before we let you go, obviously, the recruitment, we're moving towards the early signing period, which seems like the transfer portal and all that stuff is really taking over. But On the defensive side, obviously, having a good year on defense, a consistent year. If you could guess what position group or players that Nebraska might be trying to, bring in and maybe add to this class, whether it's, looking for a starter or adding some depth.
Yeah, I think there's two positions to me on defense that you look at. One that I think people talk about, one not necessarily. Inside linebacker is the one that people do talk about. I do think that depending on what happens with John Bullock, because remember he can come back for an additional year if he wants to, but that decision is kind of outstanding. We don't know. It felt like he was going to walk away, but maybe he wants an opportunity to play with it another year with his brother, and know that he's going to see starter snaps next season, right? So maybe he comes back. But inside linebacker is a little bit of a concern there. I think you need a thumper in there. And then the other spot for me is cornerback, like not a defensive back that can play, both spots or can or all the spots that can rotate and all of that. I mean, a true cornerback that you can put out on an island. Now, those guys are hard to find, but if you could find a serviceable one or a pretty good one, I think that would be a welcome addition after losing Quentin Newsome. He exhausted his eligibility and will be playing on Sundays next year. And Lynham entered the portal as well. I think you need another cornerback, even though they like Dwight Poodle a lot. He'll play next year.
Man, that's awesome stuff, man. Greg, I thought it would be good to have you on because obviously your perspective and your knowledge, not only is it, deep in Nebraska, but national. And I think sometimes that's even a better view because they have an unbiased view. But I want to thank you again, man. And we're going to have you on starting in the new year and obviously through the rest of this year. Be easy, dude, and we'll get back to you.
Hey, appreciate it. Talk to y'all soon.
All right.